And we have some news just coming in. Al Jazeera journalist has lost his family in the Jabalia attack, is what we are learning. 18 family members have been killed in the Jabalia camp attack. Dozens dead in strike on the Jabalia refugee camp. Airstrike on the densely populated refugee camp. Israel releases images of the airstrike. The IDF says refugee camp is a Hamas stronghold. We're getting in details of the horrific strike in which an Al Jazeera journalist has lost his family members, 18 of them. In this particular airstrike that has been carried out by Israel, Israel says that this was in fact a stronghold of the Hamas, but at the end of the day, this was a refugee camp. 18 family members of the Al Jazeera reporter have died in the Jabalia camp attack. Dozens dead in the strike on the refugee camp airstrike attack. This is a densely populated refugee camp. Israel has released images of the Jabalia airstrike. Refugee camp was actually a Hamas stronghold, says Israel. Israel continues to go all guns blazing, literally, against the Hamas in the Gaza region. As far as this refugee camp is concerned, Israel says this was a Hamas stronghold. But an Al Jazeera journalist has lost his family members, all his family members, in this particular attack. Refugee camps is where many, in fact, men, women and children are taking shelter in several parts of Gaza, including North and South Gaza. However, this attack, Israel says, was required because this was a Hamas stronghold. Gaurav Sawant, in fact, is getting us more details on that story. Gaurav, at the end of the day, this was a refugee camp in which several people have died. Israel says, or rather justifies it by saying that this was a Hamas stronghold. An Al Jazeera journalist has lost his entire family in this particular attack.
You are right. This is the biggest refugee camp, one of the biggest Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. The Gazan authorities are saying that 50 people have been killed, 150 have been wounded in this Israeli strike. So while Israel insists that this was one of the strongholds of Hamas, this is where Hamas leadership was hiding, and they claim that they have successfully eliminated one of the top military commanders of the Hamas organization. But the unfortunate reality also is, as Al Jazeera put out, a journalist lost 18 members of his family, including his father, his brother, his sister, his cousins, and several nephews and nieces in this Israeli strike. But this is the unfortunate reality of this conflict. Israel is constantly saying, let Hamas return all the hostages. Let Hamas, once the hostages are repatriated, perhaps there could be a relook at the bombing, but Israel's operations against Hamas will continue. There is a lot of global pressure on Israel to stop the bombings right now, with several countries across the world saying there needs to be a pause. But Israel says there will be no ceasefire. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted that operations against Hamas will continue after the massacre of 1,400 people. Gazan authorities say more than 8,000 have been killed on the Palestinian side, and this is truly heartbreaking. The images that emerge from the Gaza Strip, Sneha.
Well, undoubtedly, and that's the reason why several countries have joined in to condemn this, saying that this sort of an attack on innocents, civilians essentially, and we know that it's collateral. Gaurav, there is in fact no secret that this is collateral. There are children who've died, there are women, there are innocent civilians, innocent men who've died in this attack, isn't it?
That's a fact, but Israel's defense is that we have asked civilians to move out of these areas and go south of Wadi Gaza River, go closer to the southern part, and they said that there are two safe corridors that people should take. Those who remain in North Gaza, that's a stronghold of Hamas. Israel also says that it's Hamas that's keeping these people hostage. Hamas was elected by the people of Gaza, so it's their responsibility. The responsibility of Hamas to ensure that civilians are kept safe, not the responsibility of the Israeli authorities or military forces that are carrying out an operation against Hamas terrorist organization. So this is the harsh reality. The reality also remains that you have stop Israeli, Mossad officials who traveled to Doha, to Qatar to negotiate and ensure that their hostages are quickly repatriated. So on the one hand, you have massive bombing. On the other hand, you also have negotiations seeking the release of hostages. Hamas says, stop bombing, we will release hostages. Israel says, release hostages, or we will continue the bombing and intensify it. That is where this situation is stuck, and lakhs of people are caught in this crossfire.
Well, absolutely. As far as moving out of civilians is concerned, that passage that Israel was in fact allowing, what's been the movement on that front? How many civilians in this particular region have moved out to safer locations? Gaurav, if you could give us an overview of that.
So the expectation was that close to 11 lakh would move out, according to Israel, and this is Colonel Jonathan Konnikus of the Israeli Defense Forces. The Israeli assessment is about 8 lakhs have already moved out, but some are unable to move out. For example, those who are at Shifa Hospital or other hospitals, they are in intensive care units at the hospital, too old or too unsafe for them to move in this situation. So the situation does remain extremely precarious, and there are no easy answers here, because Israel says even for them it's an existential war. It's either Hamas that survives or Israel survives after 1,400 people were massacred. So they will continue with the bombing. They want people to move to safety. And Sneha, the point that is being made is Israel asks people to move to safety and then bombs an area. Hamas uses people as a human shield to target Israel. So it's Hamas that's using people both at the Gaza Strip and in Israel in its war against the people of Jewish origin in that area. So this is a huge situation that's so far, I mean, past 25 days and counting, the world hasn't been able to come up with a solution. In fact, the U.S. is now sending additional forces in this region to ensure that this war does not expand, even as Yemen has directly joined this conflict. And there are apprehensions that others could too, and not just non-state actors, but even state actors could get involved. And that is why the U.S. is moving in a very big way to ensure state actors do not get involved, Sneha.
All right, I'm going to thank you, Gaurav, for getting us up to speed with that. So 19 family members of an Al Jazeera journalist have been killed in that strike on a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, is what Gaurav is in fact telling us. Israel says this was a Hamas stronghold.